It's really an amazing opportunity to hear Suresh share his story about starting a bank. I never thought that somebody could start a bank, so he did. And so here, and most importantly, on a personal note, Suresh is a friend of mine. Suresh and I went to school together. We stayed in the same dorm back in India, of course. It's my pleasure to introduce Suresh here to all of you. He's a veteran technology entrepreneur, former Googler, a disruptor, and my friend. And so, ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together. Let's give a warm Detroit welcome to Suresh, all the way from Kansas.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here and known him for a long time. And when he meant disruptor, he meant the activities in the dorm in India. So that's what he's referring to. But it's awesome to be in Detroit. It's the hub of manufacturing for automobiles, which is dramatically changing. So let me talk a little bit about my journey in the quest for the understanding of the meaning of money. We need to click some things here, right? Yeah, thanks. So I was kind of curious about money. And as you start to, and this is when I was at Google, and you start looking for meaning of money, it takes you towards a bank. And as you start to understand the role of a bank in society, the role of money among human beings, money is a fascinating invention. Without money, fire came first, but then money can buy fire now. And money allowed us to attribute attribute some value to what other human beings provided as services to us and products. And so I started, let me figure out a way to understand this. Then I realized there's only two ways I could do it. One, work for a bank. Two, buy a bank. I am highly unemployable. So I said the best way to do this is to go buy a bank. So I'll walk you through the journey here. I said, there's no picture. We lose the picture? So I decided to go buy a bank. And with my last name, buying a bank in Kansas wasn't all that fun. I had to apply for a change of control application in 2009, January. I don't know any bankers in the room, but 2009, January is when FDIC itself did not know if it was going to be around. Right? Detroit was in deep trouble. So is the picture not showing? Just to the guys here, I can't see. Yeah, that picture is showing. OK, back. So this is the bank that I ended up acquiring. I wrote nearly 1,000+ pages in the application to get approval. I had to write all the policies from scratch. The third teller station is where I actually worked as a teller for a while. The knife sharpener is real. It exists. The farmers used to bring their knives and sharpen them when they were waiting for their teller service. So I did pretty much every job in the bank, from back office to teller to, I became a certified compliance officer. So I went to banking school in Nebraska during a cold winter storm. Spending 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in a marooned motel with compliance officers from regional banks is otherwise known as hell because I couldn't even leave the hotel. So I did every job in the bank so that I could understand how a bank functions. So along the way, I started to meet all the farmers. I started to understand how a little bank works, and it turns out there's no difference between a little bank and a big bank except more people because we all have the same endpoint. And along the way, I found, this is such a small town, you could find whiskey and moonshine in 3 places: in the post office, the funeral home, and the bank. And that was the old moonshine in the back of the bank. One of the customers was so happy with the service, gave me wine in a whiskey bottle, which is actually a good defensive weapon if you can set fire to it. So I haven't found the courage to open it yet, but it's there. So with what we had in 2010, 11, we had a rudimentary core system, no APIs. Because I thought it was easy to get APIs in a bank, and I went to my core who promised that he can provide APIs. Turns out he can never do it because he's still operating in an ISAM database. Anybody here know what an ISAM database is? There's at least one person, so 2. So he's operating ISAM, so he was never going to be able to do it. So even with that, we jerry-rigged the system. Simple that got sold to BBWay was through our bank. Boom Money got sold to Digicel was through our bank. MoveOn, which is with TD right now in Canada, is also through our bank. So we actually started to learn. We launched mobile check deposit in 2011 or 12. So we started to learn, and also I went to cloud computing in 2010. I got summoned to Washington, D.C. by the FDIC and said, what are you doing? Explain to us what cloud is. So I had to defend our bank's move to cloud computing in 2010. So they promptly put me on the faculty at the state examiner so that I could teach the examiners how to examine me. So I did that time as well. So it's quite fun to get here. So one of the things I learned was I was an unbranded franchisee of a core processor who was essentially milking a legacy platform built before his time. That was Fiserv, First Data, every one of those guys are giving you an old system. I was thinking, at least if I had a McDonald's franchise, there'd be an M outside my building and I would get the latest recipes and marketing. Instead, this guy, whatever these guys, all of them starts with an F, as you use F as a different connotation here. But those guys were making money when I made money, they were making money when I lost money, and they wouldn't give me any APIs, nothing. So this was 2010, 11, 12. We found that there was no APIs. Payment channels were unconnected. They were inconsistently addressable across channels. We couldn't support long tail, which is what we all have to be doing anyway. Protocols did not have context, and there's no conditional systems, and compliance systems are highly rigid. And all the startups we looked at were all mostly painting fake windows on a wall. I mean, I don't know any of you, I don't know about Detroit, but Newark, New Jersey, which was going through a downturn similar to Detroit, the mayor used to paint fake windows on the wall of the buildings to make it look like the buildings were looking good. It didn't do anything to the inside of the building. That's what all the startups looked like to us. It's more like putting color lights on your shower, right? Doesn't change the water pressure. So we looked at the account opening. I think Vijay referred to it, very antiquated. The account platform was inflexible. Account funding was not, at the speed we wanted. Risk management was siloed and separate. Compliance was disjointed. So it really, you could put nice colors on the bank account and a mobile app. It didn't do anything. So we went back to basics. We had to start somewhere, right? So we had to define the future. So what is the future going to look like? The future is going to be, let me ask a question differently. How many of you are willing to wait for Google to give you an answer in about a minute? Anybody willing to wait and watch a screen for a minute after you type a search term? No one. How about 10 seconds? Maybe, right? So the future, the next generation is going to want money to move instantly, wants a loan immediately. There is no way they're going to tolerate a 3-day delay in a settlement, right? So to do that, I had to understand why. So I drew this map. I said, let me understand compliance, and let me find a way to articulate that. So if you call $100 a bank account, you put $100 in a bank account, it's just $100 in a database for the guys in the room. And if you call that number a demand deposit account, all these things come into play. As you add new features, all these regulations have to be adhered to for you to make that $100 and call it a DDA and transact with it. With the same $100, instead of DDA, you call it a gift card, there are a whole bunch of different arrows. And my old core system was not portable it was not context portable. It was very context specific, which means I was happy in a way because no other bank could do it either. All these banks that claim they can innovate, they can't. They all have context, they don't have a context portable platform. So I said, let's go back to the basic unit of bank. It's a bank account. Aristotle first principle. What is it? It's just a number in a database. And all these payment channels, what do? They're just a message that increases or decreases that number in the database. That's it. They have different names, check, debit, but they all do the same thing. Either they increase the number or decrease the number. But they all have different settlement times. They have different settlement protocols. They have different data sets. They're not consistent across each other. So we decided to normalize all of them. Right? Then I found out, I knew this, but I found that I'm an unpaid government informant with personal criminal liability. The government tells me that I have to tell them what I think is suspicious which they will later on second guess to see if I was rightly guessing it to be suspicious. And if I don't do it right, they're going to fine me. So I went to them and said, would you pay me for the time to do all this? They said, no. Okay, they said, why? They said, look, we are giving you a charter. By the way, for most of you don't know, banks do not own a charter. It's on loan from the government. They can take it back anytime. We don't own the charter, right? They said, we can take it back. I said, no, thank you. I smiled back and said, I'll do whatever you say. So there you go. So this is why banks are struggling today, because it's almost impossible to keep up with what's happening. We're essentially, banks are becoming an unpaid extension of law enforcement, right? So we said, let's solve for something first. Let's solve for speed. How do you define solving for speed in a bank? We said we had to solve for addressability, multiple network integration, instant funds availability. We leverage existing settlement systems. We create a single API. And then the regulators came and said, oh, you need real-time risk management. There is no such system in the market at that point, 2012, I think 2013. So we built one as well. And we funded a startup. We worked with them. It was called Omni, which was sold to MasterCard later, and MasterCard now calls it MasterCard Send. So if any of you Google MasterCard Send, it arose from the efforts that started here. So we realized that you only need good brakes if you need to drive a fast car more than once, right? If you're only driving it once, it's okay. It doesn't matter. You don't need brakes, right? You can be a Thelma and Louise situation there. So, but when we looked for a solution for real-time risk management, we couldn't find one in banking. So when we built one, we decided to build one across all channels, as opposed to, you'll find some of the bankers will know Falcon that only works for cards and this and that. We built one across all channels. That's when we realized that if you want to define digital banking, you have to define it in terms of real-time transactions, which is real-time risk. And if you want to compute real-time risk, you are going to be algorithmic. You're not going to be doing it in a very arithmetic fashion. So solving for speed led us to analytics, which led us to configurability, which led us to conditionality, context, extensibility, flexibility. So I'll show you the next screen. It's a lot of boxes in that one, but it kind of gives you a sense of what, as a bank, we had to go through. We had to go through challenges in account opening. We can now open an account in a few seconds on a mobile app. We had to go through product management, almost build like an Amazon-like platform where you can click and create products. But to do that, we had to support Bayesian approaches. We had to take into account cognitive biases. So again, settlement and reconciliation, we found that sometimes I was spending $1,000 chasing a $1 reconciliation, because banks have to balance the books. So we decided to do that real time as well. Wherever possible, our settlement reconciliation is near real time. We obviously spend a lot of time on payment instruments and tokenization. We built our own real-time analytics, machine learning. Finally, we went into preventative compliance. So this is a simple screenshot of what one of our product management looks like. You can literally click, 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 and create a product in our bank. Most bankers can't do that today. So I'll have this slide summarizes how we went from a legacy bank to a fully digital bank, the transformation. We found that the banks were essentially using multiple transactional systems bought from multiple vendors. Even a small bank like us had like 30 vendors. A large bank has 1,000 vendors. And they were all stitched together into a transactional system. And each vendor, by the way, all vendors had a roadmap. Their roadmap was to make more money from me every year. Right? My roadmap was what? Find a way to work with all these guys. So when we rebuilt the bank, we process mapped and we built all the processes. So we have a process-based platform now. We have, it's end-to-end map. We looked at a lot of vendor-dependent functionality and moved them to profit centers. We went from an exceptional batch-based compliance to a real-time preventative compliance, which means a bank account that was previously inconsistently addressable, which had different types for different uses, like savings versus DDA. It became a payment method. It got tokenized, which means you don't need a network like Visa, MasterCard. Technically, the large banks should have done this by now, right? So once you get to that, what happens next? You don't stop there, right? So you end up with contextual and conditional payments. So which means we had to separate account from accounting. Most banks are super glued account and accounting, and I'll just skip this because it's a little complicated there. So we first solved for account opening. Today we can open an account in seconds, right? And we can tokenize into digital identity, which is relevant to Detroit because the same digital identity now, we can make it available in IoT, we can make it available in a car. So we can take open an account and push your digital identity into other vehicles and other devices now to operate, right? So we built our own account opening platform. Today we do various products. We have one of the things that I put here, a smart fuel card. We did this as an experiment, and it was quite fun, and it has gotten into some kind of interesting demand now. We did where you could swipe a debit card at a gas station. We could call your connected car and check how many miles you've driven, and then allow the gas to be dispensed. And post-swipe, post-dispensation, we can post it back to an ERP. And I started getting calls from guys with a lot of fleet tracking issues. They wanted a card like that. So our vision of a bank is of a marketplace. It's of something like what Android and iTunes have done to the phone marketplace. We believe that the role of a bank in society is to commerce enable all consumers and businesses. It's a long tail by definition, which means the bank has to allow everybody to connect equally via the same set of APIs. Banking today is like what Ford was 100 years ago, right? You get any color as long as it's black. It's relevant to say that here in Detroit. But banking today is long tail. Google is long tail, Amazon is long tail, Facebook's long tail. Banking is not yet long tail. I think we're one of the first banks that is starting to move in that direction, where anybody can plug in their infrastructure. We have APIs for remittance. In fact, we are working on an API for a savings account. Why? Because some of the brokerage houses have reached out and said, when there is excess liquidity in the brokerage account, we want to be able to call an API and push the money into a high-yielding savings account. Right? So we are building that today, all the compliance around that and all of that. So we have an API for issuing a card. We have an API for whatever, anything that we can abstract, we are able to do that today. So as we go to a marketplace, we are seeing all kinds of applications today. I had a guy come to me and said, I am the Uber for drones, okay? Because he felt in the future you'll be able to summon a drone to take a picture of your house, clean your gutter, do whatever, shoot your neighbor, I don't know, right? So drones will soon be weaponized, right? So, but he needed to hook into a bank so that he could collect payments, send payments. And I had another guy come and said, look, I need to find on-demand drivers to move vehicle, whatever. So every time we see one of the long tail, it stopped surprising us now. Because there's so much pent-up demand on the market for people who just need to plug into a bank. Because why is that? This is, again, a great city to talk about supply chain. The entire supply chain around the human beings is getting digitized in all possible directions. And as they get digitized, there's a point at which they have to do a value transfer, which is a transaction, which is an exchange of value in turn for some goods, digital or otherwise, physical goods. At that point, they're looking to a bank saying, where are you? I need to be able to plug in and pay this guy. Right now, the only availability is Visa, MasterCard. Right? Outside of that, there is no way to do an instantaneous exchange of value for goods. So banks have been struggling with this from everything from trade finance and all the way back to simple card acquiring because of the compliance aspect of it. Because the way the banks have built out compliance today is a linear growth of compliance, which means if you do 1 million transactions, you need so many people. If you do 100 million transactions, you need 100 times. It won't scale that way. So we've gone to a very preventative compliance. So that's what we see in the marketplace. I'll talk a little bit about the evolution of the bank account here. So to us, we had to understand the evolution of a bank account. The bank account started as a single entry, let's call it a bag of money under your pillow. That was the original bank account. That was under your head. You kept it next to your knife, maybe, right? Then from there, sometime in the Middle Ages, with the invention of the double entry accounting system, you could now enable payments, you could do trade finance, but you're still maintaining a ledger, physical ledger entry on both sides. So that was the next evolution of the bank account. After that, big IBM came around and created an arithmetic account that could add, subtract, compute fees, and compute interest. And that is what most of the banks are operating on. You have an arithmetic account that basically gives you a statement and tells you what has happened in an add, subtract, maybe compound interest that you have to pay. Where we are is an algorithmic smart account. Today, our bank account knows all your bill payment history, knows if your AT&T bill is 20% more than last month, so can ask you through Amazon Echo via APIs and say, hey, your bill is 20% more than last month, you still want to pay. Right? So the bank is starting to get more and more aware of your activities. So we call it an algorithmic smart account because it is still not deep learning, it is real-time learning, it's made a lot of inference engines, and it is very specific to a bank account. So we've reached that point today. We've just put some of our connectors onto the IBM cloud. The idea is that we'll be integrating the smart account data, the inferred data, into a more deep learning capabilities of like in Watson and hopefully someday DeepMind as well. So we think what's next is an AI-enabled account, an account that can give you more choices. For example, our account can already predict, say, you're going to run out of money next month to pay bills. We can use that signal to say, do you need a loan to cover the bill payment because you're qualified for that automatically, we can do that. Or the account can say, you seem to have excess money, do you need a high-yielding product, and publish a signal to one of the brokerage houses who can then produce a tailored product to you. That's kind of what we think. When we get to that, the AI-enabled account will say, hey, we think based on your risk profile, we're going to automatically put you into this kind of things because your liquidity, 8 months from now, you're going to need some liquidity, so we'll arrange for that. So we think those choices will come on your phone. You're just going to say yes or no. But to get there, while it's nice to say that looks nice and you see all these videos, pretty much no bank I know can get there because the data set is not yet normalized. So that's what we spend most of our time on, trying to understand how to get normalized data set and understand how these things are working. So how do we look at the future? We think the future, there is going to be a path to standardization, meaning there will be a single protocol for all transactions. It's already happened in India. India today, you pretty much can move money instantly to anybody, whether it's consumer or business, through the RTGS system. Mexico is on its way. Space system is doing it. Some countries in, I think, Northern Europe are already doing it. US has the greatest RTGS system, but we're not using it well. We think funds transfer domestically and globally will be instantaneous in the future, which means you can pay anybody anywhere in the world. Why is that important, especially now that I'm here in Thai? Because we are in an age where we are transitioning from the information economy to the knowledge economy. We all talk about it. Every speaker mentions that in some fashion or other way. What does it mean? It means for the first time, human beings, today we can get information, anything instantly, as opposed to buying an encyclopedia, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever. But then what happens is some people can monetize the same information to knowledge. They can monetize it, but we don't have a financial address globally. We don't have a monetization mechanism for a woman who can build great jewelry on a 3D printer sitting in Ethiopia. We don't have that today. We may have a phone address for her, but we don't have a financial address. So the next, just the way internet went 1 million times in number of websites, you're going to see transactions scale 1 million times in the next 20, 30 years. Because as a globe enables knowledge monetization, you're going to see an explosion of payments, an explosion of peer-to-peer activity, explosion of business activities globally. So that, again, Internet of Things, our digital identity can be expanded. It's already being expanded to Internet of Things. And you're going to see asset account payments. You're going to see money laundering schemes and fraud schemes coming from the same players who are doing money laundering and hacks. And they're going to use IoT to do the same thing. You're going to have 1 million IoT devices stealing a penny each. So you're going to see all of that happen. And we're already building systems towards that. You're going to see on-demand escrows for microsystems. You're going to see SKU-level underwriting, meaning you're going to point your phone at something and say, can I get a loan? And the bank's going to say yes or no. We already do that. If you go to United Airlines or JetBlue or Southwest, it's our bank that's financing a vacation. Don't ask me why somebody wants to finance a vacation. That's a different judgment. But we do make those loans. You're going to see smart bill payments from us, I think, in a few months. Where we'll know your bill and you'll be able to do interesting things. You'll be able to finance the bill, or you'll be able to get other things in contextual information on the bill. The things that are not known, thanks to what's called the Bank Holding Company Act in the US, is Amazon, Google, and Apple have not yet become banks. If they do, and Walmart, if Walmart joins, pretty much every other bank in the country is dead. There is no need to think about it. Similarly, if Alibaba is allowed to buy MoneyGram, Western Union is dead. They might as well hand the keys over and leave, right? So, because the legacy organizations are not set up to operate at the DNA of a technology company, which is what these guys are. And correspondent banking, which is essentially the infrastructure to move money globally, is going to die and is almost dead as it is where it's going today. So that's how we look at the future. This is the legacy universe I walked in 2009 or 10. It's a mess. You have all kinds of players everywhere. We thought buying a bank and building a tech stack below that is a way to play that. But today, we see the bank account as a portable smart account. It's already happening in Europe with PSD2, where accounts are portable. We see a unique addressing scheme on the accounts. We're already working with all our partners on that. Then payment protocols, legacy ones will be supported. The new ones could even be crypto, doesn't matter anymore. It depends on how the central banks deal with crypto and how they're going to leverage that at this point. Obviously, there's a lot of noise today with Bitcoin and all that stuff. But I'll put it in perspective. I mean, Bitcoin volume is still maybe billions, but the wire volume in the US alone is 2 quadrillion. So there is no comparison, and the global volume of money is just thousands of orders of magnitude greater than any of the cryptos put together today. So our vision is to serve a long tail in the banking through a marketplace approach. So I know I have another 5 minutes left, so what I will do is I'll start to take questions in the remaining time. So thank you.
Take a few questions.
If there are none, you get to dinner faster. That's your incentive not to ask questions.
No, whatever happens, the dinner is served at 7:30. Yes. But I still want to come close to you.
Hi. You said that one of your problems was normalizing the data in order to get everything to a level where you can sort of standardize banking. As it's going to happen, well, as it's happening now and as it's going to happen in the future. And I was sort of unclear on what your biggest barrier was to that. Is it that there's so many types of exception-based transactions, or is it that there are so many different types of regulations that create the need for exception-based transactions?
It's contextual. So I'm actually a little crazy. I actually did this myself. I first set up a spreadsheet of all the protocols and started to look at the differences. It's like reading the history of payments, because Nacha was set up at one point in time. ISO 8583 was set up at a different time. Right? Fedwire was set up at a different time. Swift was. So each one, in their time, they try to address their problems and what is available, and they try to anticipate a future from their point of view. They would have extra fields for that. So once you understand what that is, sometimes you cannot normalize. Sometimes you just take the exception. Also, each one of them had fields that were specific to their settlement times and specific to the rules on refunds, and like ISO 8583 has a refund and auth settle and dual versus single message. So we spent a bunch of time doing this. In some cases, we had to accommodate multiple fields for the same thing, but we had to figure out how to do the machine learning around that. So it was not that easy. We're still figuring out things as we're finding new things we didn't think of every day. So dinner time, guys, please. Okay,
all right.
Suresh, you mentioned about First Data and Fiserv not change their ways in decades. Now you come up with a new formula. Are they concerned? You think they're going to change their ways, or are they going to acquire you and fix it?
You should be talking to them, right? No, I'm just kidding. But so what I found when I talk to these organizations, they become siloed. So they're extremely good at taking me to lunch and buying me a steak lunch. And I don't eat steak, so didn't have too much of a connection with those guys. But they've become a model where it's a relationship-based sales, right? The guys from whom they bought the system, the core system, are long dead. Like they bought them in the 80s and 90s, and they don't even know how to maintain them anymore, right? That's why, so they're trying to put patches and patches. It's what I call the third Band-Aid problem, right? There is a vice president of third Band-Aid. They have no idea what the wound was. Right? There's a third Band-Aid, and he thinks he's holding up the entire, infrastructure, right? So unless they do a clean start, which many of them are not able to, it's going to be tough for them to. There'll be a lot of optics. It'll be like the fake wind on the wall, right? There'll be a lot of those optical, illusionary products coming out. But if we could use some of those, we would have done it by now. Even the card platform. I'll give you an example. You should ask yourself, why can't my bank Give me a gift card, HSA card, FSA card, debit card, multiple virtual cards with a single click. It's the same protocol going to the same switch. Why can't they do it? They can't because it was designed that way and they don't know how to change it. I had to rebuild the entire card switch to make it that way. Are they going to buy me? I have no idea. But if they have a bag of money, I'll take it. Any more questions before drinks? Oh, we got one more. I'm trying to incentivize people to go to the drinks.
So I think you have been touching on the accounting and the banking side, right? But a lot of the payments that we do today, right, are through a lot of the services like PayPal, Zoom, et cetera, right? So how are you thinking of integrating that into your system, and how are you going to manage the fraud that's associated?
Very good question. So we had to come up with another vision that is we're not sharing on the screen here. So we said, what should be our vision? Because we have met over 700 fintechs or startups that we work with. And we've launched a marketplace where it's called ylabs.io. So the way we think of these startups is we have a massive orchestration engine with real-time compliance. Doesn't matter who, what it is, everything has to go through that. So we have our own KYC vision. And today we can do KYC in X countries. Tomorrow somebody comes to me and says, I know how to do KYC in Ghana and Nigeria. We know exactly where to plug it in without changing anything here. We have a bill payment roadmap with machine learning and all of that. So we do that in US. We are adding India and Mexico soon. Any country they want to do bill pay, we have a clear place to, it's almost like the cars. You have a place to screw something in and plug it in. We have that thing so that, and all the data, the compliance flows through that. We have something called Pay Anyone roadmap. Pay Anyone for us is to be able to pay anybody in the world instantly, which means we are now connected to 14 countries, and anybody brings a specific, let's say, specialist in Ethiopia and how to connect in Ethiopia, we know exactly how to bring it into our system. We have a savings roadmap. So we're working on how do we enable cognitive biases in savings. What do I mean? Let me explain that. So I was talking to somebody and said, look, I'm unable to keep my diet up. I can't resist buying a donut when I go to Dunkin' Donuts. So we said, but I also am not saving money. So why not, if we can detect if you spend more than $3 in Dunkin' Donuts and automatically save $5 because we assume you bought a donut, right? Or we can punish you by not letting the card work when you swipe it for more than $3. So whatever, right? It's your cognitive makeup. I was talking about this in another conference in Toronto a few weeks ago, and one of the heads of a global bank and said, hey, she said, I can't stop myself from buying shoes. So can you punish me if I buy shoes and put $300 into my savings account? So you're going to see millions of those schemes published that people are going to self-manage the way you do self-managing your diet. You're going to see that on the savings side. So you're going to see that come. On the liquidity or the lending side, you're going to see on-demand loans. You're going to be able to buy a house, pre-approve a loan for a house in the future by pointing the MLS listing on your phone. You're going to be able to do that at your Best Buy and get a loan approved for a TV you want to buy, right? So the way you get credit is going to change. And the way you pay for the credit, we're looking at with another bank where for companies that trade with, let's say, other currencies where they export, say, let's say, to Germany. We're looking at a structure where you borrow at 0 interest rate for a week, and the bank makes a spread on the FX, right? So all kinds of new schemes are coming up, but all we care about is the infrastructure to plug everything in, have real-time compliance around it, machine learning around it, so I can explain to my regulator from Springfield, Missouri, not the one Simpsons are, but the other one, right? And explain to them how this all is compliant with the FFIC guidelines. That's all I care about. Because if I'm not compliant, it's all only nice PowerPoints. Doesn't matter. Thank you very much.